Thank you for staying with us. From the recent happenings in the country, we can safely say that the newly inaugurated senators have a huge task ahead of them. However, we'll be speaking on what we expect them to do and the areas we expect a lot more attention. Joining me still in the studio, Princess Adebisi Okunsanya. She's a political analyst, and Segun Sopitan, a political analyst of ACT Network. Gentlemen and lady, thank you very much for staying with us. I'm going to ask a question because I sampled a lot of opinions today on social media asking about the character of these people, who, if it turns out to be this, what's going to be the... Now, what has happened is that the APC has taken the overall in the National Assembly, whether we like it or not, and they've won by a clear margin. Does this mean somewhat that we're going to be having a rubber stamp legislature, like we always like to put it? Or do we see the PDP gearing up for a fight? And again, let's not forget that they outnumber the PDP. So is this really good for the nation's democracy, Princess?
Well, without repeating what is obvious, the APC are in charge of the houses, both the upper and the lower houses, and they have a majority in them. Nigerians expect that the leaders are not going to be rubber stamp leaders. From the oath they took today, their allegiance, first and foremost, is to Nigeria and its people, and not their party. And Nigerians will be watching very closely. The antenna of the people will be raised very high. And I'm sure they will not hesitate to call to order where they think they're not doing.
But how often have we, I mean, I'm sorry, I hate to be the pessimist, but let's use our previous, this just elections that just passed as a litmus test. There were so many high bars that were raised. People had hopes that Nigeria, because of the kind of things we heard Nigerians say, the reactions, or let me use the language, the body language of Nigerians, we were expecting that, you know, Nigerians would come out en masse and vote out the people that they didn't want. But we saw the same old kind of elections. In fact, we saw a drop in the number of people who came out to vote compared to those who actually registered to vote. Speaking up again, it's not just about going on social media to type away. Do we really see Nigerians actually speaking up or increasing their antenna, or we're just going to, you know, pay lip service to these things and go back to our business as long as we have food to eat?
Well, as long as we have food to eat, and the food are fast disappearing on many Nigerian tables, and that is exactly the turning point.
So we have to wait till we start starving and dying before we start finding our voices?
Well, people are already agitating, and this government needs to do a number of things and do them very quickly, like creating jobs, enabling environment for businesses, employment for the youths. I mean, haven't done all these and haven't taken all controls. The government needs now to begin to give us results, and if the results are not forthcoming, I don't see Nigerians' patience, you know, lapping longer.
I hear we're the most patient people. In fact, we're the most, we're the best managers in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the legendary ability to drill a hole in the wall and pass through instead of fighting back. Yes. You know, we all know that about Nigerians now. But the question you ask is an important question, and I think it's important that we as Nigerians also manage expectations. So what's a rubber stamp? What does that mean? What's a rubber stamp assembly? What is the job of the National Assembly? Is it to antagonize the executive, or is it to complement? We must remember, first of all, that we've got one government, the federal government of Nigeria. That federal government has the executive arm, the legislative arm, and the judicial arm. All three are supposed to be governing us for our progress, right? So the essence of the separation of powers issue is just to prevent us from, because of the natural nature of human beings to be selfish, from descending into an autocracy in case we get...
But these arms are supposed to check one another.
Absolutely. That's right. So there's the checks and balances. That's the point I'm trying to make. So there's the checks and balances responsibilities of the three over the other. that has, we must, I heard a new term that I have just fallen in love with over the last 2 or 3 days, that the arms are independent and must be independent, but they must be interdependent as well for the progress of the country. So it's not for, we don't want, I as a Nigerian absolutely don't want to see a legislature that is constantly bickering and is constantly at war with the executive. That is not in our interest, because then governance will suffer.
Yes, of course.
What we want to see is a legislature that questions everything that is presented to it, make sure that it makes sense, and before you then approve. So now you don't have to be antagonistic before that happens. And the fact that you're questioning things does not mean you are disloyal to the party. The new speaker, for instance, Mr. Gbajabiamila, in the last dispensation, this 8th assembly, I noticed that on several occasions, he came out to speak against some of the things that was happening in the country. He came out to voice his disappointment, and, you know, maybe not as often as you would have had it from a PDP person, but I saw some level of independence from him in some of the opinions that he offered, even on the floor of the House. And that's what we want. So I don't want us to have, yes, a rubber stamp in quotes, where no matter what the executive brings to the fore, you just approve it and then you let it go. But also, we don't want a National Assembly that is holding the wheels of governance back.
To ransom.
And that happened to some degree in the last 4 years.
Let's quickly, before we go to the budget, because that is a core, let's talk about laws. That it's not just enough to pass bills and, you know, make laws. How can we make sure that the National Assembly, both the upper house and the lower house, try as much as possible to help the necessary agencies to enforce some of the laws that have already or previously been passed? For example, the right to life, security of human beings and their property. And we have seen that insecurity is a big issue as we speak. A journalist recently was beat black and blue by SARS officials, and I used to work with him side by side. And, you know, there's a lot of laws being taken into the hands of people who are supposed to be enforcing these laws. And of course, we have rustlers, we have hoodlums, we have all kinds of things. You know, how do we see this National Assembly stamping their foot on the ground, helping, like you said, working in synergy with the executive and the judiciary to make sure that the average Nigerian is protected? Because if we are not protected, we can't even talk about the budget, we can't talk about the economy, we can't talk about anything else. So let's start from there. The most important thing, which is a fundamental human right, a right to life. Let's talk about that.
Yes, part of the problems that are now facing the nation, especially about all these bandits and groups that are terrorizing everybody everywhere, was that some of them were pardoned and they were enlisted back, you know, into the federal army. I mean, that has been a big problem, number one. Number two, the Chief of Army Staff said recently that they don't even have equipments, you know, to face them, ammunitions, and so much money, I understood, was taken off in billions, you know, to buy arms and ammunitions for them. I mean, the security forces needs to be given what is required to fight the elements that are facing the nation.
But two questions, I'm sorry to cut in, but two questions, security and monies that are being voted that are not necessarily used. Who gives account? Because we have a Dasuki case still pending. We also have an issue of security votes that they say, oh, well, it's security, so you never talk about it. But then where does the money go? Shegun?
Well, so the thing, and that's the question, who questions? Now, the role of the National Assembly, one of the key functions as defined in the Constitution, is oversight. We need to see a whole lot more of oversight from our National Assembly, and that has got to be one of the improvements we see in this 9th Assembly. Up until now, the 20 years of our democracy, what oversight has developed into is a group of senators getting on a bus and going to visit some site somewhere they wear the protective
helmets,
helmets, all that, or they get on a plane and they come to Lagos, they inspect projects. The oversight function goes way beyond that. So on this issue of security, for instance, the Senate committee on whether it's what's it called now, Interior, for instance, should be asking the police for reports on the number of extrajudicial killings that happened.
I remember in the 8th Senate, a certain police chief refused to show up.
Absolutely. We can't have
paramilitary chief also refused to show up.
We can't have now.
And they get away with it.
Now the point now is this: that in itself is not necessarily oversight. It goes beyond asking them, the top guys, because that was more of a war of egos and what have you. We don't need that. What we want you as the assembly to do is to send, they should even have, what are the administrative staff doing? They've got like 5,000 staff in that National Assembly servicing the senators and the House of Reps members. What are they doing? They should have a research department, for instance, that is asking questions, gathering data from the international community that they can compare with the data they're getting from our local security agencies to say, look, this is what is happening, why is this so? And then based on that, if need be, either repeal and reenact laws that need to be repealed or introduce new laws, based on the oversight. We have not had enough of that, So so it's a good thing we're talking about this now, because talking about setting up an agenda for this assembly, we need to see more substance from what they do. A lot of times you say, oh, we've enacted, I heard on the news the Bayelsa Assembly saying of all the 36 houses of assembly, they were the most active because they enacted, I think, about 200 bills, laws.
Do those bills,
were they put into operation?
What kind of impact will they make?
Have they made on the citizens? Yes.
Exactly. Those are the kind of questions we need to. So even if you don't do 200 laws and you do only 15, if those 15 are fundamental and earth-shaking, and then you make sure that they're implemented, then you have made impact. And I think that's what we need to
Let's
see
quickly
more
talk
from
about the
these guys.
budget. I'm going to give you 1 minute each to react on the budget, because we have comments from social media. We want to see what people have to say. The budget, it's a drag. It's like a tug of war. You have the executive on one hand and the legislature on this hand, and then in the middle is the people. It's a crazy thing. Every single year we have this to go through this mad cycle. How do we push? Because I don't want to say, do we see them doing this? Because it's like we need to give them a bit more of a nudge. So how do we push that these things are done early enough and they come early, and so the monies can be dispersed early, so we can achieve something before another cycle comes?
The president always complained that he's been delayed by the budget. He talks about budget padding and inflated, budgeting and all that. But these are things that could be sorted out by the House. Part of the 9 conditions that Ndume gave today when he was proposing what he would do if he was elected the president was that he will ensure that budgets are passed within 3 months, of receiving them, and they're passed on time.
That could also be a campaign speech.
Absolutely.
Well, that is the expectation. It shouldn't be more than that. Because budgets are made for specific periods. And when they are not implemented as and when due, all the parameters becomes useless.
Yes.
And they become inoperative.
And then we carry over.
And then, the economy is not progressing. So the House needs to shake up themselves. These are areas of their, limitations. They are areas of failures in the past, and they have to improve on them.
Okay.
Just as not only budget, just as also bills and laws, they should be enacted on time. They drag their feet so much.
Shegu.
So on the budget issue, very quickly, since you say, you've got, now, I've got a suggestion for them. The problem we have is that we're stuck. We're stuck in a catch-22 situation. We've worked ourselves slowly into the situation where we can't get out. So every year, the budget gets presented to the Senate about November. The earliest we've had it was October. And even when we had it in October, we didn't get it approved until around May.
And here we are again.
Now, the reason for that is very simple, because I've always wondered why. Why can't the ministries and parastatals put all of their, the budget office, why can't they put the budget together and get it to the assembly by July, for instance? Now, the reason is that in preparing that budget, the performance of the previous budget must be factored in. You've got to look at, okay, this is what was appropriated for this particular project,
So we need 6 months to get that done?
Yeah, so but the point is this. Now, what portion of that last budget has been used so that I will know how much I'm budgeting for that particular project for the next year? Now, if the budget is approved in May, it means that you can't, the procurement process alone takes about 4 months for any money to be released. So at the lag time between budget approval and the commencement of implementation of the capital projects can be anything between 3 months to 6 months. So you won't get that. So now what the Senate...
This is what the Americans call a hot mess.
It's a mess. It's almost something we can't get out of. But I think that this assembly, what they need to do is to come up with either a motion, but I think a bill would be more like it, to say that for a particular cycle, we've got to break this cycle, this vicious cycle, right? So, for instance, for 2020 budget, for instance, I think they need to come up with a bill that gives legal backing to the executive preparing a budget without some of the necessary inputs
from the previous
budget, so that we can break clean from that cycle and start afresh. And then they need to provide a law that pretty much compels the executive on the latest date by which it must be laid.
Yes.
And all of that. If we don't have legislation around this, we're going to keep going around in circles and, and like she said...
And who wants that? We don't want that. Well,
exactly.
We have reactions from you on social media, because these conversations cannot be done without you. And so we always give an opportunity for your reactions. And we have a couple of reactions from social media. That's an interesting one. Ikekere Madu shouldn't have contested at all. Rather than be disgraced like this, he should have used the back seats like David Mark. Omo-agege is now the DSP. Indeed, the same thuggery pays sometimes. I don't think so. We don't advocate for that. But, somebody said it's very clear that institutions should discourage illegality, that actually the ones endorsing the fact that omo-agege should be... Okay, they're just buttressing what you said.
Exactly.
Omo-agege should be undergoing investigations, but he's being rewarded for stealing the maize. Interesting. I can't see that one, but still coming from our social media here. It says today Senator Omo-agege is the Deputy Senate President of the 9th Assembly. I weep for Nigeria's democracy. Wow. Okay.
We've got
somebody here says, anyone who is Nigerian and claims to be surprised that a man who stole the mace of the Senate on live TV is now Deputy Senate President, is a hypocrite. So he's trying to say that these people mirror us. If we do right, they wouldn't have a choice but to do right.
Absolutely.
But we somewhat absolve them, or pay a blind eye, and hence the reason why corruption is still going to be ingrown within the country. Well, we want to thank you for your comments. Just keep them coming on our social media page. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and of course we are on Instagram. Gentlemen, before I let you go, quickly, just one last thing. How soon do we see these people getting to work? I'll start with you, Shegu, quickly.
They've got to hit the ground running. They have to follow the example of Governor Sanwo-Olu, who on his second day in office had executive orders out. So, please, less of recesses. The recesses that our National Assembly members go on, sometimes it's just appalling. Let them hit the ground running. There's a lot of issues: security, economy, and...
Okay. You got 30 seconds, Princess.
Well, principally, they know the state of the nation, and they know that they have a lot in their hands to do. But part of the things I will expect them to do, in view of the economic situation of this country, is that they come together and have a rescaling downwards of all their emoluments and entitlements.
Oh, now you're talking.
That will help Nigeria a lot.
But how's that? Anyway,
and they will be living by example, because this country is really suffering. A lot of the money we budget are being borrowed. And a lot of the money that is being borrowed is also spent in paying interest on existing loans. I mean, may God help us.
Hot mess. That's what I'm gonna. That's the word for today. Hot mess. I want to thank you very much, Princess Debisi Ogunshanya, political analyst, and Segun Shopita, political analyst of ACT Network. Thank you very much. You've been an interesting guest. Well, we'll take a short break. When we come back, it'll be time for my take. You don't want to miss this.
The All Progressives Congress has commended members of the party aspiring for the positions of the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives who have willingly stepped down to support the party's candidates. The national chairman of the party, Adams Oshiomhole, while speaking to newsmen in Abuja after an extensive meeting between lawmakers-elect and the National Executive Committee of the party, says the party is hoping to present a united front ahead of the elections into principal positions of the National Assembly. Oshiomhole says the party's adopted candidates for the President of the Senate and Deputy President of the Senate are Senator Ahmed Lawan from Borno State and Senator Ovie Omo-Agege from Delta State, and also Femi Gbajabiamila and Idris Wase for the Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives.
A lot of people who have stepped down, whether you go by ranking, by exposure, by whatever definition or criteria, they are all individually qualified to contest for any of these offices. But in the interest of the party unity and as a mark of respect to Mr. President and the leaders of the All Progressive Congress, these and other men and women in the two chambers have offered to step down. For those who have stepped down, they have done that in recognition of the fact that at any point in time, only one person will lead. I believe that my dear friend, Senator Ondumi, will not be a Lone Ranger. He would abide by the spirit of the party and the leadership of the party, and he will respect the leadership, our overall leader, which is the President of our country, who is also the leader of our party. So I do not have any fear. I believe that Ondumi will accept the will of the majority.
It's time for my take. Well, well done to the 8th National Assembly. They did great. Well, they completed their tenure. We hope that they did all they did for Nigeria, and we hope that it has a lasting positive effect on the nation. But now we have a new era which has begun in Nigeria. The 9th Assembly has been inaugurated. To the senators who are coming in, I say, do not make the same mistakes that your predecessors made. Listen attentively and observe diligently. The needs of Nigerians and the masses are very important. Choose to make lasting impact on the nation and take conscious steps to achieve that. Remember, you are in that position to serve your fatherland, not your party, not your friends, not just your constituency. So do it judiciously and do not let the efforts of our heroes past be in vain. I am Mary Anacon, and it's been Plus Politics. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.